Quad Cities Chamber Business Briefs are short, free-to-attend programs designed to connect you with the latest guidance and resources to help you and your organization thrive. Look for business briefs on our website and in our e-news. The content will always be available for you to refer to again. Now, if you have any questions during today's program, please place them in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to as many as possible after Kimber's presentation. Now let's get started. Before I introduce Kimber Brokaw from Genesis Employee Assistance Program, I would like to thank Genesis EAP for their sponsorship today. Kimber holds a Master's of Social Work degree from St. Ambrose University. She is a licensed independent social worker in Iowa and a licensed clinical social worker in Illinois. In addition to working for Genesis EAP, Kimber leads a private practice in Moline and serves as the Director of Counseling Ministries at New Hope Church. Her mission is to bring freedom through improving the health of the body, soul, and spirit, because when we feel better, we do better. Kimber's area of expertise are helping people process trauma and to understand how their brain is wired to help them heal and move forward. She helps her clients discover the life they desire to live and teaches them how to get in alignment with that desire. Today, Kimber is going to share how to harness the power of resiliency you and your team showed over the last year and move from surviving to thriving in our new normal. Thanks for joining us today, Kimber. Please take it away.
Well, Jack, thanks for having me, and thanks for that intro. We would just want to thank the Chamber for giving us this opportunity to share today on this message of resilience. So we're going to dive right in because, as Jack said, this is meant to be short. So I've got a lot of content. I'm going to skim the surface of it and hope that what we can leave you guys with today is some valuable information that you can, start to utilize right away. And then obviously, of course, because we're here in the community, if there's anything more you need, we're here and just a phone call away. So our objectives today are to understand how the brain responds to change, learn how prolonged grief can initiate trauma responses, review the 5 pillars of resilience, and gain some insights for implementing resilience into our daily lives. The new normal. We've heard that term a lot the last 10 months, have we not? Our new normal has been changing all the time. For many people, it's shaken our stability. And what we're finding as time has gone on is that it is damaging our mental health. With that constant change comes a lot of uncertainty, new roles, information overload. I think if you even if you turned off the news and you aren't getting daily updates on all of the things, think about just the information overload that occurred when we began to learn what sheltering in place was all about. When some people were sent home to work remote. Some people were temporarily laid off and furloughed. Other people became homeschool parents overnight. A lot of new information that we were having to process and new roles. And let's be honest, we've experienced a lot of loss in the last 10 months. Some people have experienced the loss of an actual loved one. And if you haven't, you're fortunate, but you still have not gotten through these last 10 months without a little bit of loss. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some future slides here. And then too, we've had over the last 10 months, some civil unrest, right? The political landscape of our country right now is like something most of us have never seen before. So this new normal, creating a new normal, this is our new normal. When are we going to get back to normal? It's creating some challenge, but we have this thing called resilience, right? Or hopefully we have resilience. Resilience just simply is the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Well, let's talk about psychological resilience. What is happening psychologically? The psychological resilience is the ability to mentally or emotionally lost my word there. Oops, sorry. the window of people is blocking my words. Mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis. Let me go back here. or, and this is bolded for a reason, return to pre-crisis status quickly. Okay, so if resilience is this ability to bounce back, but you've got crisis, constant change for 10 months, the ability to bounce back has just become more challenging for people. And resilience also exists, as it states here, when the person uses mental processes and behaviors in promoting personal assets and protecting themselves from the potential negative effects of stressors. So hang with me here as we pull this together and we look at what's going on in our brain when we're experiencing crisis, when we're experiencing constant change, and the level of resilience that we have had before this crisis started, before the COVID pandemic occurred. Whatever level that resilience was, that's the resilience we had to draw from. So when you take a look at what's happening in the brain, we have the conscious and the unconscious mind. And the question here, who has control? Well, typically in normal experiences of change, when our resilience kicks in and we're able to bounce back, the conscious and the unconscious mind work pretty well together. And, that we don't even know that they're kind of toggling, if you will, throughout different experiences that we're having. So the unconscious mind is our primary source of human behavior. This is where our habits lie. This is where all of those things that we do automatically without even thinking, this is where they are. So, when you get up in the morning and you start moving about your day, you don't have to tell yourself what the next step is, right? You just do it. You just roll out of bed and you start moving through your morning. Things like driving to work and how we get there, and, not having to tell ourselves every single step. I'm sure you don't turn your GPS on every time you leave your house to go someplace that's familiar. And that's the unconscious mind. It's a place that's familiar. It's where all the things that we do are comfortable and familiar. Now, the conscious mind is where our present awareness and mental processing is. So this is the part of our brain where we're creating new habits. So for example, let's say that you were going to start getting up earlier in the morning because you wanted to exercise. You would set an alarm for an earlier time. And when that alarm would go off, your unconscious mind would go, no, we don't get up this early. We don't do that. And your conscious mind would say, well, but we are now, right? Because we want to start exercising in the morning. And they might have a little bit of resistance initially, because the unconscious mind, it wants to keep us in that comfortable, familiar state. It might push back on the conscious mind a little bit. But the conscious mind, if it's doing the job that we want it to do, is going to go, no, this is what we're doing. We're creating a new habit. So you can kind of see, whether it's starting a new morning routine, whether it's starting a new job, whether it is, you've had your kids at home and now you're sending them off to school, or your kids are graduating and now you're sending them off to college. Your conscious and your unconscious mind have to navigate some new territory. So what's happening right now is that our unconscious minds are on overload, and it's just not comfortable. They're trying to find that state of comfort and familiarity. And just when our unconscious mind finds that state, something changes again. Something new happens. I don't know all of you who are with us today and what your area of business and employment might be, but my guess is that most of us have had some sort of a back and forth between working from our typical workspace to maybe working from home, to maybe being furloughed, to going back to work, to maybe being furloughed again. So that's just one example, of course, but we get continuous changes with regards to the levels of precautions that we need to be taking in our community, that kind of thing. So for the last 10 months, this toggling between the unconscious and the conscious mind has actually been pretty stressful. And I'm calling it COVID fatigue. The actual term is psychological fatigue, but I'm seeing it a lot in my practice here at EAP, as well as in my private practice. I am seeing the effects of COVID psychological fatigue on people because the unconscious and the conscious mind are in this constant state of toggling. So we have a lot of change. We're maybe having a difficult time bouncing back like we would have in the past. Our conscious and unconscious mind are in a constant toggle and tug of war. Now let's add to that this concept of prolonged grief. So this is a quote that comes from an article by Dr. Joseph Mercola, and he's talking about people who've experienced the loss of a loved one due to the coronavirus disease. Now, we know that there are also a lot of other people who've died from things other than the coronavirus disease. And how you say goodbye, how you honor and, mourn and honor that person's life, our typical traditional ways of doing funerals and mass and, ceremonies haven't been possible. Now, some people, their resilience, their bounce back factor have allowed them to say, okay, well, how do we want to do this? And I would imagine that there are probably some people who've had to grieve the loss of loved ones, and they've created a new way to do that. And they maybe even said, this was better. But in general, what's our unconscious mind used to, right? It's used to your typical way of grieving the loss and saying goodbye to loved ones as they pass. So we've got that going on, but we also have other losses. We have, for some people, the loss of their jobs, the loss of that daily routine, whether they, lost their job or not. If they're working from home, their daily routine has changed. The loss of community, right? This ability to go and do the things that we always did with the people that we always did them with, extracurricular activities, our hobbies, our entertainment, all of those things are other forms of losses that, we're starting to miss, right? So let's bring that together. And when you take prolonged grieving, and you add it on top of the uncertainty that has been going on for the last 10 months, people start to feel some fear. It's becomes scary, and when is this ever gonna change, and is it ever gonna get any better? And what starts to happen is our trauma response kicks in, because here's what happens. When we feel afraid, we look for what we can control. And when you start to feel like there's not much that you can control, that's really when the trauma responses tend to kick in even more. So what you're seeing here in this visual is that when we feel afraid, our body senses danger. It causes the amygdala aspect of our brain to activate the fight or flight response. And there's just a couple of examples of how you might know if you're in fight or flight response. When that happens for too long, when our stress is up for too long, that fight or flight response is engaged, our stress is high, our cortisol is high, then what we stay in a constant state of fight or flight. It's prolonged. We don't ever, our cortisol doesn't ever come back down for us to relax. So some people might be experiencing that right now, and they might be having a harder time doing some of the things that they used to do to relax. The other two on the bottom there, freeze and fawn, those are just other ways that we respond to trauma if we don't go into fight or flight. Again, couple of examples there as to what that could look like. Now, I say could look like. I don't want anyone to look at the screen and see these examples and think automatically you're experiencing trauma. But it's just something to go, what's going on in me? I wonder, I wonder if this is that. Now, my next slide, I'm not actually going to switch to it right now, but if you've got it in front of you, because I believe it was shared in advance, the next slide is a reflection, just asking you to recognize or ask yourself, do you recognize any of these responses in yourself? Do you recognize any of these responses in those around you? And what I want to point out here is that the examples in this slide are symptoms. And a symptom really reveals to us that there's an underlying need. And, this is one of the things that we help to assess when we're working with people in our offices here. They might come in and they might be identifying some of these symptoms. And it's our role to help figure out, is it trauma? Is it not? And either way, how do we help them move through that? So let's look at that here real quick. And the Bounce Back Project identified 5 pillars of resilience: self-awareness, mindfulness, self-care, positive relationships, and purpose. Again, just because of the time we have today, I'm going to go over them kind of quickly, but this is the kind of stuff that we're able to do hands-on with people when we're working with them in our offices here, teach them some of these tools that they can use at home on their own, and then kind of go a little bit deeper as needed. So these 5 pillars, these are a few exercises that I would do if we had some more time and we were all in the same room together. And the first one being self-awareness. This is the one, I love this because you can do it anywhere. This deep breathing exercise. You can do it anywhere you are. Obviously, if you're at home, it's a little bit more relaxing to close your eyes and get into a comfortable position. But if you can't, you can do it anywhere you are. And I like the 4 in, 4 out because of 2 things. One, because it's pretty simple to remember, 4 in, 4 out. And it allows a person to focus on their breathing, focus on counting the seconds, the 4 seconds in and the 4 seconds out, but create a rhythm that's most comfortable for them. There's a whole lot of science too that talks about what happens when we get oxygen in, how it oxygenates our cells, how it brings stress levels down. Most of us are breathing pretty shallow throughout the day. So the deep breathing exercise helps us to slow down, take some deeper breaths in and out, get the oxygen that we need, bring the stress level down, and have some more immediate relaxation. Mindfulness. Mindfulness and self-awareness go hand in hand. And mindfulness is really just bringing yourself into the present moment. So what crisis and change and all of that can do is it can cause us to fear the future, the unknown of the future. And what mindfulness does is it brings us back into the present. And so one of the exercises here would just be to identify the upside to 3 challenges that you have going on right now in your life or that you've had going on over the last 10 months. It's not to minimize or say that the challenge wasn't really difficult. It's just to say it was difficult, it is hard, and there's some upsides to it as well. I teach people in my office never to look at things as either or, because it creates a place where we can get stuck. But if you look at something and say, I can be struggling with this and there can be some good things that come out of it, it helps us to move through what we're going through. Another tool for mindfulness that we didn't put on here, but it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's about engaging with your senses. So you just identify what are 5 things I can see, what are 4 things that I can touch, what are 3 things that I can hear, what are 2 things that I can smell, and what's 1 thing that I can taste. And you can do that wherever you are. So brings you into the present moment. Self-care, I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about this: diet, exercise, and sleep. Diet is just as much as we can eat real food as opposed to processed food. That's the goal. Exercise is just about movement. And honestly, if you're feeling stress, if you identified yourself as any of those trauma responses, the type of exercise you want to do is more relaxing. You want to go for a stroll of a walk, not a power walk. You want to do some stretching, maybe some yoga, some Pilates, some slower moving kinds of activities that will bring that stress level down. And then, of course, sleep. Sleep is pretty important. Everybody kind of needs a different amount of sleep, but you might notice that when you're going through psychological fatigue, you need more hours than normal. Listen to your body. That is an indicator that, you should give yourself that sleep as best you can, whether it be at night or whether it be in the form of little naps throughout the day. Remaining positive relationships. Just identify 3 people that fill you, right? We don't have a lot of time right now to spend with people who drain us. We have to sometimes, but we got to be really discerning about who we give our time to. And then when you identify those 3 people, if you're not already in contact with them, identify a way that you can connect with them in the next week, whether it be on the phone, through some sort of a Zoom, FaceTime, or, somehow safely getting together in person. And then the last thing would be purpose, identifying a few things that you do that have meaning to you. And one of the examples I gave when I did this presentation a couple weeks ago was, I have a dog that is aging, and lately I've been very aware of her age. And so I've found it purposeful to slow down and spend a little bit more time cuddling her, playing fetch, that kind of a thing. So things that are purposeful don't have to be huge. They don't have to be world changing. They just have to have purpose and meaning for you. So those are the 5 pillars. Those are just a couple of examples of exercises. And like I said, when we are working with people, we have an opportunity to go much deeper. So these last few slides that I'm going to share with you, and I hope I'm doing okay on time, are just a few slides to just kind of show you, we're here. This is the service that we provide, the little bit of information about our beliefs here at Genesis. EAP is what's considered short-term solution focused. So the companies that we contract with, typically their employees are getting 6 sessions per calendar year, sometimes more, it just kind of depends. But the nice thing is the benefit applies to the employee, and it applies to their family. So when a company in town has a contract with us, it's really reaching more than just that employee. But here is just a little bit of information regarding some of the things we tend to assist people with. Physical illness, obviously mental and emotional conflicts, relational stuff that's going on. We do a little bit in the area of alcohol and drug abuse. And while we are not financial and legal experts, we have access and partnership to people who support us in that way as well. So here's just a little bit of our contact information, our main phone number. We're currently doing primarily phone and video sessions. We'll get back into in-person as soon as that's most feasible for everyone. And this is just the final screen. If you have any questions that you didn't choose to put into the Q&A chat today that you would like to ask me specifically, here's my email. And I'm going to tell you that that's the best way to get a hold of me, because while today I'm in my office, typically I am working remotely from home. So if you leave a message on the voicemail for me, I may not get it as quickly, but this 386-4004, that's our main number. We do have a secretary that mans that number. So if you happen to call that number, she'll get the message to me anyway she can. So I'm going to pass it back over to Jack for questions.
That's great. Kimber, thanks so much for providing this really important information at a critical time for our chamber members and attendees today. Just a reminder to everyone, we will be putting this recording on our website under our business brief section of our site. And we'll also be sharing the slides with all of you after today's event. So please stay tuned for that information. Kimber, I have a question for you. So we saw the exercises, the 5 different exercises that people can practice to maintain that resiliency, to harness that resilience, to recover, to reset. What would you suggest for employers? How could they help make time for their employees during the workday to practice some of these exercises, from the mindfulness to the deep breathing exercises?
Well, that's a good question. And obviously everybody's work environment is a little bit different. So, definitely if you got the luxury of having a space in your office where people could just get away from the work that they're there to do and take a few minutes, I think, a different environment is helpful. The other thing too, I think, is visual reminders. How many of us sometimes put things on our phones as a way of reminding us to think about something? So, posting visual reminders anywhere in your workspace that is an encouraging way to remind somebody. I don't know about everybody, but, I've got one of these Apple Watches and it tells me to breathe every single hour. It tells me to stand every single hour. So, finding those visual ways to remind. I think too, again, depending on the environment that people work in, if you recognize that somebody is stressed and you have the luxury of saying, hey, why don't you go take a walk around the building? I got your shift covered, or I'll answer phones, or whatever the case may be. Because like I mentioned, that slow walking When you pair movement with breathing, you've just up-leveled both of those interventions. So whether it's inside the building or outside the building, just take a walk, do the deep breathing. It's pretty incredible how quickly people can experience some benefits from that. So those would just be a few things that I would say off the top of my head, not knowing specifically everyone's work environments and options.
Oh, thanks, Kimber. Yeah, I feel like a walk outside is always does me well. Even
Yeah.
if it's cold, bundle up, take some deep
Yep.
breaths, and go for a short stroll. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, thank you again for joining us, everyone, and thank to Kimber for providing us with this great, important information. And thank you to Genesis EAP for sponsoring this event. As a reminder, recording of the program will be posted on our website later today. And we will also be sharing a survey afterward that will include Kimber's contact information and slide deck. So thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. Thanks for having us. Take care.